Hey, pay close attention, because in this video, I'm going to explain everything to you in detail. Let's get started with the theorem about the sum of a triangle's exterior angles. And the theorem says, in any triangle, the sum of its three exterior angles is equal to 360 degrees. Look, let's consider, for example, this triangle. Now, let's extend each of its sides a little bit so that we can see the exterior angles over here, which in this case I'm representing with the letters A, B, and C. According to the theorem, if we add the measure of angle A, the measure of angle B, and the measure of angle C, it has to add up to 360 degrees. That's what the theorem is talking about. But before you believe this, it's important that we do, even if it's not very formal, a brief proof, so we can see if what it says here is actually true. So, before we start with the exercises, let's look at a brief proof, which, I insist, is not formal at all. But I do need you to understand where this comes from. Look, here I drew the triangle we were talking about, where we have the exterior angles represented by the letters A, B, and C. And also, I already put the interior angles here, which are represented by the letters D, E, and F. Now let's look for something that relates the interior angles to the exterior angles. And you'll agree with me that we can use the theorem we saw in the previous video, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch it so that what I'm about to explain is very clear to you. Next, I'll leave it up here, or also over here, in the video description. Look, in that video, with that theorem, we already said that, for example, the measure of angle C has to be equal to the measure of angle E plus the measure of angle F. Right, because the theorem said, in a nutshell, that the measure of the exterior angle has to be equal to the sum of the measures of the interior angles that are not adjacent to the exterior angle. So, we already talked about that in the previous video. That's why I'm telling you, if you haven't seen it, it's going to be harder for you to understand what's next. If you've already seen it, come on, keep going with me. So, look, what are we going to do next? Well, let's say that whatever angle A measures, so let me write it as the measure of angle A, it has to be equal. So, equal to what? Well, to whatever angle D measures, plus whatever angle E measures, plus whatever angle F measures. So, let's write it as the measure of angle D, plus the measure of angle F. Now let's do the same thing, but with angle B, so I would have that the measure of angle B has to be equal. Equal to what? Well, to whatever angle D measures, plus whatever angle E measures. And finally, let's do the same thing with angle C. Angle C has to be equal to, the measure of angle C has to be equal to the measure of angle E, plus the measure of angle F. All right, once we have this, let's do the following. Look, we're going to add the left sides of the three equations, and we're also going to add the right sides of these three equations. What would I get? Well, I would simply have the measure of angle A, plus the measure of angle B, and plus the measure of angle C. Now on the right side, what would I have? Well, let's see. Let's see how many times the measure of angle D appears. You can see it appears here and also over here, so I have a total of 2 times, what? The measure of angle D. To this, we're going to add, let's see how many times the angle appears. You can see it appears here and also over here. So, we're also going to add 2 times the measure of angle E. And then we're also going to add 2 times, the measure of angle F. That way, it ends up like this, right? 2 times the measure of angle F. All right. As you can see, on the left side, we have a factor. On the right side, we have a common factor, which would be 2. Therefore, we can group that 2, right? Or, factor it out as a common factor. So we're going to write the 2, open parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, we'll have the measure of angle D plus the measure of angle E. And plus, not the 2 anymore, right? The measure of angle F. see, it's as if I multiplied the two by each of them, and I would get exactly the same thing, right? We're good so far, right? Perfect. Let's continue now. Start thinking, how much is this sum? Look, the measure of angle D plus the measure of angle E plus the measure of angle F. What does this sum equal? Well, look, it would be this angle plus this angle plus this angle. How much do they add up to? They add up to 180 degrees, right? Therefore, here, I would have that this is equal to 2 times 180 degrees. And finally, how much is 2 times 180 degrees? Well, it would be a total of 360 degrees. And now, well, I'm still dragging this same one. I'm going to put it over here. There. So we have that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C has to be a total of 360 degrees. And as you can see, we're arriving at exactly the same thing I showed you at the beginning of the video. Easy, right? So, what is all this useful for? Well, it's very simple. Because if we had, for example, the measurements of this angle and this angle, I would immediately know how much this angle measures. For example, right? Let's do some exercises so you can see that it's super simple once we've understood all of this. Exercise number 1. We have to determine the measure of this interior angle and the 3 exterior angles. And also, we have to check that, in fact, the sum of the exterior angles gives us 360 degrees. So let's do it. Look, the first thing we have to do is complete this part here, right? That is, to know, or, well, to calculate the interior angle that goes here. For this, we have to remember that the sum of the interior angles has to give us 180 degrees. So, let's add 60 degrees plus 70 degrees. That gives me 130 to reach 180 degrees. I need 50 degrees, right? Does that mean that this interior angle measures 50 degrees? All right, let's start filling in the outside ones. I want you to see that from here to here. It's true that it measures 60 degrees, but we already know that all of this is a straight angle. Therefore, if this measures 60 degrees, how much do I need to complete the straight angle? In other words, how much do I need to complete 180 degrees? Very good. I need 120 degrees, right? Since 120 degrees plus 60 degrees gives me 180 degrees. All right. We already have this angle. Let's go with this other one. We already know that from here to here, it measures 70 degrees, but up to here, it should measure 180 degrees. So it's the same. So how much do I need? So that when added to 70, it gives me 180 degrees. Very good. I need 110 degrees. Now I have 110 plus 70, which gives me 180. And here it's the same. How much do I need here so that all of this adds up to 180 degrees? Well, in this case, it has to be 130 degrees, right? Perfect. So we've finished, we're supposed to be done, but we still need to check if, in fact, the sum is actually going to be 360 degrees. That should happen, right? If not, it means we've done something wrong. Come on, let's add them up. I get 0. Well, these are degrees. 2 plus 1 is 3 plus 3 is 6. And here the total sum is 3. As you can see, the sum does come out to 360 degrees. So everything is correct. Let's move on to exercise number 2. I want you to notice that in this case, they're not giving us the measures of the interior angles. But honestly, we don't need them. Why is that? No, because we said that the sum of the 3 exterior angles had to be 360 degrees. So we could set up an equation and solve it. Or we could just look at how much these two add up to. And whatever is missing to reach 360. That has to be this angle, right? Well, it has to be the measure of that angle, so let's do it that way. So let's add the measure of this angle to the measure of this other angle. Or, well, let's add 153 plus 102. Here I get 5. Here I get 5, and here I get 2. All right, I end up with 255. Now, I already know that these 3 have to add up to 360 degrees. So, to 360 degrees, we're going to subtract what I got from adding these 2 measurements, which was 255. So let's go ahead and subtract. It becomes 10 minus 5 is 5. It became 5 minus 5 is 0. And 3 minus 2 is 1. I'm getting a total of 105 degrees done, I finished. That means this angle x measures a total of 105 degrees. We're done. Let's go with a third and final exercise, a little bit harder. As you can see, in this case, they're giving us algebraic expressions to represent the measures of the angles. But it doesn't matter. We can set up the equation. So, what we need is that the measure of this one, plus the measure of this one, plus the measure of this one, adds up to 360 degrees. So let's write that down. I'm going to skip writing the degrees, okay? We'll just use the algebraic expressions. So I write 2x plus 3 plus 6x. Sorry, 6x minus 18 and plus 4x plus 15. This has to add up to 360. We add up everything with x. 2x plus 6x is 8x plus 4x is 12x. So we write that down. Now let's add the ones without x, which are this 3, this minus 18, and this 15. 3 minus 18 is minus 15 plus 15 gives me 0. So let's write it like this. 12x plus 0 equals 360. But since we have a 0, it's as if we have nothing, so we can just remove it. And I'm simply left with 12x equals 360. From here, we solve for x, and we get 360 divided by 12. Here, we can simplify a bit, so we don't have to do this division directly. I take half of both, and I'm left with 180 divided by 6. And now it's easy, right? 180 divided by 6 is equal to 30. The value of x that makes this equation true is 30. This means that what I have to do next is simply substitute a 30 into each of these algebraic expressions. So let's go ahead and put a 30 in here. You can do it in your head, right? Let's see. 2 times 30 is 60. Plus 3, that's 63. So this angle measures 63 degrees. That's done. Let's move on to this one. Here we have 6 times x. So 6 times 30, which is 180, and 180 minus 18 would be 160. Sorry, 170. 162, right? 162 degrees. All right. Now finally, let's go with this one. Same thing. We substitute 30. 4 times 30 is 120. And 120 plus 15 gives me 135. So now we have the measures of the 3 exterior angles. We're done. But before that, just in case we made a mistake somewhere, let's check. It should be that when we add these 3 angles, we get 360 degrees. So let's do it. 5 plus 2 is 7, and plus 3 is 10. Carry the 1, 1, plus 3 is 4. Plus 6 is 10, and plus 6 is 16. Carry the 1, and here the total sum is 3s. I'm getting 360 degrees. This means what we did is correct, and that's it. We're done. Well, that's all for today. If you like this video, please subscribe to this channel. I upload videos every day. See you next time. Take care, and be good. Bye-bye.